Stargates,
Wormholes,
portals. It sounds like we are describing the opening to many of the great science fiction movies of the last few decades. You might wonder what place they have on a Christian podcast or podcast.
it's true. What if we told you that there is far more science and technology to these than science fiction, and that they're even mentioned in the Bible? Stay tuned as we walk through the door and explore what lies on the other side.
We are so glad to be coming back to you again with another exciting series. This is not just an episode.
No.
This is going to be epic for the next many weeks. But first we want to have a shout out to our partner, LifeVantage. If you have not had a chance to peruse our website to look at all the wonderful products that LifeVantage has to offer, we highly encourage you to do that. If you're tired of feeling sore, if you're tired of the memory fog, if you're tired of not being able to remember or focus, or just
Struggling with joints and aches and pains and sort of the process of aging in your body.
or illnesses, they have a ton of products, and we've tested a lot of them. In fact, if you are on the GLP wagon, the great thing is they have Mind and Body, which activates your GLP. It is not a supplement, and that is wonderful news right there.
That is.
Well, anyway, today we are looking now at, we kind of broached into it last time
We did.
with Bigfoot and blurry things out there.
That's right.
Today we're going to focus on Stargates, portals, and wormholes. Oh my.
So some of you may be wondering why we're talking about any of this and why we're giving so much time and attention to it. There was a time when I actually would have wondered the very same thing, but after a lot of study and research, I've come to realize that this is hugely important and we need to know as much of it as we can.
Well, you know, and this is actually kind of a little more of my wheelhouse. For the last couple decades, really, I have really been vested and invested into, as we talked about in the spiritual healing section and all that kind of stuff, the 10 and the 90. And I think that'd be a really good place to bring that in right here so people
Absolutely.
kind of understand again. In case you didn't get in on any of those episodes, you know, God, when he opened up a lot of these gifts, the one thing that he showed me was something that was so profound and so simple. When you're talking between the difference between the earthly realm and the heavenly realm, I call it the 10-90 theory. You know, we always say that, they say you only use 10% of your brain, and
Right.
I always wanted to know what the other 90% was for. And God told me. He said the 10% is what we can experience here on earth. It's what we can touch, we can smell, we can see, we can taste, we can learn, we can know.
Right. It's knowledge and
Right.
experiences that are here.
But the 90 is what's in the spiritual realm, the stuff that we can only know from him. So we'll get into a little bit of this time travel too phenomenon. Or you've heard of people who say they have ESP, the kind of clairvoyance, soothsayers,
Right.
fortune tellers. Okay, that goes into that could be a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
But basically what it is, if you think of a line, and here's the 10, and then once you get up over into the 90, there is no time or space.
Right.
And so I would argue that there are not people who have ESP. It's people who have been able to breach up over into the 90. Who can see things, who know things. I would even so much as argue that there are times for some people, not everybody, but that deja vu effect. You know, I don't know if we talked about that on an episode or not.
Maybe we've talked about it. I
Yeah.
think we might have talked about it on here once.
I don't know. But, you know, you have people who have deja vu who just say, you know, I think I've done this before. But my problem was I would have like deja vu moments, but it was like, I knew what was going to happen next, and that's exactly what would happen. So then I'm like, is this a Lazarus effect? Which is a whole other story in itself, too.
That is.
But it makes you wonder about all this stuff. A lot of that, again, is crossing into that 90, because when you're up there, again, there is no time, there is no space. You can see things past, future,
Right.
where I would argue John was at
100%.
when he wrote Revelation. So that being said, Okay, this is what we're getting into now. With portals, stargates, all that stuff, we are now breaching beyond the 10.
Right.
However, there has been billions and billions of dollars, I'd probably even say trillions over the years, invested by even our own government and other entities, including the Vatican,
to breach that veil.
Yes, to figure that out. And where is the doorway, or where is that Stargate that can broach beyond the 10? So that's why we're doing this, because more and more is coming into the news.
Oh yeah, it's all over the place, and we've got a lot of examples.
And now that the government is declassifying a lot of this, and this took place before Trump ever got into office. Right. Even at the end of Biden, well, I'd say the last 2 years was when they were forming committees and declassifying all these different alien encounters or portal pictures, videos that were unexplained. So we thought, okay, why are we broaching this? Because we want to bring, there are so many shows out there right now talking about all this.
Right.
But they're not coming from a Christian perspective.
No, they're not. And the solutions or the reasoning behind it that they're offering is really counter to what God would say. And we think it's important for you to know, because this is going to continue to be a problem of deception that's shared.
Well, and it's also to pique the curiosity of the people who are looking to want to be, oh, pick me. I want to be the next one to go through the portal or whatever. Right. The problem is what's waiting on the other side of most of that is not something you're going to want to be messing with.
No, definitely not.
So what does the Bible have to say?
Well, it's interesting. There are so many experiences in the Bible, and we've touched on a couple of them. But in 2 Corinthians 12:2, it says, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Now, caught up is a word that's used frequently in the Bible, a phrase to kind of describe this experience. And this is talking about Paul. And then in Ezekiel 8:3, it says, the Spirit caught Ezekiel by the hair and lifted him up between the earth and the heaven. So
here we have another time of where we've had two instances of people being, they call it translated, and I don't know why that's the word, but basically, beam me up, Scotty, when you go from one point A to point B.
Right. And it is definitely from a physical presence to a spiritual existence of some sort, because what they get to see and experience during those times is not something we get to see and experience here in the 10.
However, the translated, though, sometimes is you're going from the 10 to the 10.
Exactly, yeah.
They're using the 90 to go in between.
And we'll cover all of that for sure, but it can be place to place, continent to continent kind of thing, or even beyond that.
Ezekiel saw visions of God in Jerusalem, showing him he was traveling both through time and space. That would be like your wormhole kind of effect. And this was similar to Paul's experience in 2 Corinthians, where he was caught up into that third heaven. Why did God allow him to do that? Well, we don't know exactly the whole reason for that. But what we do know is, because he had breached that, was he under attack, spiritual attack. Afterwards, that's where they get into the whole where Paul was given a thorn in his side, that he prayed and prayed and prayed. I think part of that maybe was to keep him a little humble, possibly. Or it could have just been because he left the 10, and spirit realm did not like that, especially where he had gone. But we don't know too much about John, if he suffered much after all of those visions. And I suppose being on Patmos was enough of a suffering. I don't know.
Because in Revelation 4:1-6, it describes his experience of being in the Spirit and transported to heaven. What I think it's interesting to know, because this is something we've talked about, I know we've touched on, but it said the third heaven is where Paul was taken, which would indicate that there's more than one.
Oh, and we know that there's many, many more. There's also in one of the scriptures where it said with John, a doorway.
Yes, the doorway to heaven
was open. I find that beyond interesting that they used those words, because when we're talking about stargates and portals, stargates is the actual doorway that goes through.
Mm-hmm. That's what you have to go through in order to access that tunnel or wormhole. Yeah.
So in the book of Acts, in chapter 8, 38 and 40, this is talking about Philip. And the same thing happens there after he was, he'd met this eunuch and he was told, you know, the eunuch started talking to him about Jesus and wanted the gospel message, and he baptizes him right there. And when they came out of the water, it says, the Spirit of the Lord carried Philip away, and the eunuch saw him no more.
And then Philip found himself at Azotus. Just, bam, he was in a new place. So that's another one of those times where it was just from one physical place to another physical place.
I would argue that there is another one. Of course, now this is Jesus himself.
Right.
But
we do know that Jesus limited himself here on earth to things that only humans could do.
Of the earthly.
Mm-hmm.
So when he had gone into the synagogue, and this is the big reveal, when he's standing there and he's reading from the book of Isaiah, and he talks about, I've come to proclaim the good news and to heal the blind and the lame and to set the prisoner free. And at that point, that's where he says, today I tell you the scriptures have been fulfilled.
Right.
He's basically calling himself the I am.
Right.
And they get mad and they go to take him out to Mount Precipice to throw him off the mountain. Now, we've been there, and it is a long way, actually. I mean, Nazareth, you're up here, and you got to go all the way down the hill through really, really big town. You got to go all the way up to Mount Precipice to get to the top of this, to throw him out. So this wasn't like they just took him out of the synagogue, and I don't know if you had ever thought about that when you read this. You know, in your mind, you're like, he's in the synagogue, they took him out and tried to throw him off.
Mm-hmm.
This was a massive procession.
Right.
They take him all the way up, but then it says, just as they were ready to throw him off, he disappeared.
Imagine that.
And was no more. And then we see later in the gospel he shows up somewhere else.
Right. I was just, as you were describing that, I mean, we went there and all of this, like, seeing that as the foreshadowing of him having to carry the cross and, like, that big procession up to the top of the hill. It just wasn't the right time yet.
Yeah.
So sightings and belief in and discussions about aliens, extraterrestrials, UFOs, UAPs, you name it, have been growing exponentially in the last several decades. People all across the globe have reported very similar instances. Disc-like flying objects appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye, hovering, moving lights, 10 to 12 foot tall shadowy creatures, or just the list goes on and on.
Well, and I love all the pictures that show
like a
portals.
Door,
I mean, where they're going and then they're just gone.
Right.
But
or
now
even
our
like
cameras,
swirly,
yes, because our cameras now are so much more high tech.
Mm-hmm.
We're literally picking up portals that these things are moving through.
So we took some really popular ones that have been posted on news sites quite a bit. So there was a blue spiral spotted over Hawaii. There was actually a blue circle with a blue halo around it. That was one of the portal-looking ones. And then there's quite a bit of footage or pictures on an airplane. They were over the Aegean Sea. And there was some kind of craft maneuvering in and out of the clouds. It almost looked it looks like a whale or something. Yeah, it was very odd.
Weird looking. Well, and then just not that long ago, and I mean, this was January 6th of
2024.
Epiphany. Mm-hmm. But it was in Miami, the mall. They got this 911 call. People were screaming that there were over 10 feet tall aliens at the shopping mall. Mm-hmm. And people were just going nuts. They sent out 100 police cars.
Units, right.
Yeah. To the mall, right? And they have pictures, they have actual video footage from across the way, cams or whatever, that caught these things. Well, you couldn't really see very well, but you wonder how much of that, though, has even been doctored since then that made things fuzzy. Mm-hmm. But here's the fun thing. Because we have an entire mall that is in beyond panic. Everybody's there. And all of a sudden, that news was cut. Everything was scrubbed. And then they came out and said, well, it was 4 teenagers that got arrested for fighting that were unarmed. They needed 100 police cars for 4 unarmed teenagers that were fighting.
And the part that just like gives me goosebumps. It was scrubbed from the internet.
Mm-hmm.
From like, what kind of power does one have to wield and influence? Because I mean, for most of us, you put it up online and that stuff is there. Somebody can find it forever, but it is gone. It's gone.
We know this on many things. We're going to be looking as we get more into even the alien phenomena, ancient aliens, ancient astronauts, ancient gods, in the fallen realm. Really, that's what we're dealing with here. More and more stuff is getting scrubbed.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that also more and more is being brought to light. And that's what, it talks about that, what your thoughts are on when the end times are coming. We're always getting closer to it. And it says in the Bible that what's been in the dark will be brought to light. That's happening. And they're continuing to try to hide it, but it's going to just continue to come out. One, in the suburb of Las Vegas, there was this bright green light seen falling from the sky. And they have some ring bell camera footage of that. And people called the police and said they saw phase shifting aliens.
And that's what was with Miami.
Mm-hmm.
They were phase shifting.
Right. And video footage shows something strange and unexplainable. And that's what they said in these reports. People were agitated. They were just upset. There was clearly something that happened. But then, imagine, amazingly, all of that footage is gone.
It was scrubbed. But they did bring in the professionals. I mean, this is for even the police. And they had it analyzed, and they had the people analyzed. And they're like, yeah, no, this is legit. Everything about it was legit. Their demeanor, their reaction, and even the footage, this was immediately when it was examined. And then again, that was all just taken off. Well, the other constant with these experiences is how difficult it has been to get good proof, and how quickly, as we said, all that proof just disappears. So if there is nothing to any of this.
Right. If it's all some big conspiracy theory, a bunch of crazy people.
Although now we're getting so many people see this and observing it and are talking about it.
That's helpful.
On social media. Why would anyone devote so much time and resources to eliminating it?
Right. Makes you wonder. So hopefully we've said enough to at least pique your interest and keep you listening for more. So let's dive into Stargates, portals, and wormholes.
So as we're getting ready to jump into this, let me ask you, Kristen, when you hear the words, and kind of probably the same for most of the general public that's listening, when you hear the word Stargate, or you hear the word portal, or you hear the word wormholes, what do you think of when you hear that? What comes to mind?
Well, initially, obviously, Hollywood and movies and TV shows. I think of the movie and the TV show Stargate, because I really liked both of those. Now, portals and wormholes for me bring about kind of a different perspective or thought. I guess for me, wormholes, I think of more of science and out in space and some of things that are maybe a little bit more tangible. Portals, that just brings to mind something different entirely.
Well, okay, so let's back this up. I'm going to go the backwards way, and I'm going to start with wormholes. So when I was in school, this was back when Battlestar Galactica, I can't even think of the name of Buck Rogers. I think it was Buck Rogers and the villain. Something with their show or the movie, it was with the black hole. And back then, this was all just in theory, which all of this still is in theory. Wormholes, portals. Wormholes actually was something that Einstein had come up with. Yes. But has anybody ever traveled through a wormhole?
Right.
Well, that we don't have so much of a tangible thing. If we did, wormholes would be taking a thing, person, place, thing, from point A and sending it off into a whole different time or space or dimension or something like that. If that were the case, and if we knew that these really existed, which I'm not arguing they don't.
Right.
But why are we not able to pinpoint where they're at, and how come we can't get our satellites through the wormhole and into whatever? Now, that would be the other thing. Even if we did, I don't know, could we transmit and receive if it's in another dimension? I have no idea.
Most of the movies say no, communication doesn't travel that way.
So then, okay, let's bring it around to the 1960s, 70s again. Then you have Star Trek. And really, what was that about? You were warp speeding, but you would start one place and you would end up in another dimension or another galaxy or universe, whatever. And then they had, beam me up, Scotty, teletransport. I mean, I'll ask you, is there anybody out there who has never said in their life, boy, I wish I could just teletransport? Especially if you got a long commute all the time, or if it wouldn't be much fun if you had all these groceries. But if you want to go from point A to point B and you don't want to have to take the 10-hour drive or 12-hour drive, it'd be nice to just go there. However, for those of you who are science fiction buffs and you know Galaxy Quest that Tim Allen was in, it was a mock of Star Trek, and they teletransported, and the thing they brought up, it turned it inside out. See, that would be my log. Beat me up, and it's like, I don't think so.
Put me back down.
So we have all this stuff from movies. That which, and they always make it be very science.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, we can do this.
But they make it also seem like it's technology and science that is nowhere close to what we have. It's not like, oh, we're going to be doing this in 5 years.
Well, however, we had scientists that thought we would be doing that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so then let's get to Stargates and portals. To me, it may seem like it's the same thing. Well, let's look at the Stargate.
Well, Stargates are technology that allows for accessing or creating this wormhole. And it's the wormhole itself is a tunnel that connects two fixed points, and it allows for really fast travel between them. It's a shortcut through time or space. So that would be the wormhole, and that would be the little
that we talked about. And it's really weird looking. I'm gonna put up a picture, but it has a little like a phonograph thing at one end. And then it goes down with kind of an opening. It's really, when I look at it, I see like a cochlear ear thing or something, like an ear canal.
It's interesting.
Design shape that you wouldn't think that's what it would look
And that's how it's depicted in lots of hieroglyphs, and then that's how Einstein depicted it as well. But it's interesting that his drawing is quite similar to what's been carved in stone for thousands of years.
And matches what's in the Egyptian tombs and Mayan ruins and places that were far enough and long enough ago that they didn't have connection with each other, and yet they're drawing the same things. Why I like the movie Stargate is because it is so visual. That happened to be a round disc. However, they have excavated ones like this.
Huge round ones, and also some doorway-looking ones.
Multiple ones. I have lots of pictures. We'll put up some of these. But with the movie on Stargate, you had to know the code. You think of like a safe code, you had to crack the code. But the code really was for whatever ones you picked, took you to
the matching Stargate on the other end.
Dimension.
Yeah, you had to know like the latitude and longitude. You had to know the destination code.
Now, also in that movie, and we're going to look at this again in the next few weeks as we keep going with this. I did not know until doing the research this last week. For those of you who have seen the movie or not, Kirk Russell is in it. It's really good. They get this little brainiac guy who is the only one that can kind of figure it out, and he cracks the code. And they end up going through the Stargate, which is a portal that takes them into this other dimension. But the dimension they end up is as though they were in like Egypt. It's not Egypt, but it's of an alternate universe kind of Egypt. And it is being ruled by, of course, an alien, but they don't know that because he's disguised. But this alien his craft is a pyramid that comes down from the sky. Okay, thought, this is all TV movie, kind of thing.
You would think, yes.
Until, what did we discover on researching?
So there is record carved in stone in this temple in Abydos, and then on some of the cuneiform tablets from thousands of years ago, of a pyramid coming from the sky and landing, and creatures getting out of it, alien-like creatures getting out. Carved in stone. I'm just saying.
So I guess my point was, this is where they came up with that idea for this movie.
Right.
Maybe it's not as
Far-fetched.
Yes, is what we had thought. So if a wormhole, portal, whatever, can take you from place to place, when you think about then the afterlife, I have always said that when a person moves from here to the other one, I always pictured it as though walking through like a waterfall or something, kind of like on the movie, that portal, that, where you just,
you're walking through a veil.
You just walk from here to there and you're already there in heaven. But now with Jesus, well, we've had where people have died. They've either gone through into heaven or they've gone to hell. Mm-hmm. When Jesus died, he went not to hell, but he went to Tartarus and then back. Mm-hmm. So he was traveling through
different dimensions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about the fact that there's these sighting instances all around the world, and that Stargates and wormholes date back thousands of years. And like we said, but the amazing part not only is the wormhole depicted on that, but there are actual pictorial representations of portals and stargates in ancient civilizations, Peru and Egypt, showing this like sort of spiral waveform with creatures coming through them. Like it's carved in that things have been coming in and out, and they've showed like part animal, part human-like creatures. They've shown things that look really similar to like the alien greys with the elongated, like the crystal skull people and that kind of stuff.
They're gods.
Oh,
now
yeah.
You have to realize when we're talking about, when they keep talking about the gods, this goes all the way back to ancient Sumeria. Mm-hmm. Then you get into Egyptian, you get into Phoenician, you get into the Mayan culture, you get into all of these, even Native American.
Oh yeah.
It's always about the gods coming through these portals.
Oh,
now, with Native Americans, then it seemed like it moved from the gods to Anunnaki, which is the giants,
which would have been the Nephilim, or the offspring of the fallen realm.
Mm-hmm. Ancient and current Aboriginals have stories that talk about visitors from the sky that come through portals. It's always the visitors from the sky, or the gods of the sky, or the people of the sky. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you even, and we'll get into this a little more as we get into the aliens, but they're called the sky people. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get into that later, but there is another group that even call themselves the Milky Way children, or
Children of the Milky Way, I think is what it was.
So there is a connection between the ancient stories and the visitors from the sky, and what are we seeing and experiencing today?
Oh, definitely.
So where does part of this whole portal and Stargate thing come from? What do we have as tangible evidence that is like, will blow your mind when you figure it out?
Well, this is one for me that really did. So one idea that helps with this connection is this concept of ley lines. And lots of people probably have heard of it. I'd heard of it.
So what is a ley line?
I had no idea. So it's an electromagnetic line of force that creates a vortex. And we believe that there is a kind of a power grid that's around the entire world that's beyond anything we can even understand with the technology
so
we
you have these points
today. Yes.
And then it's how the lines all work.
The ancient sacred sites, all of the temples, all of the pyramids and the ziggurats and all the different ancient religious sites and whatnot around the world are all connected on this grid of ley lines. Like, there's no way they could have known that. There's no way.
And it's not just that they're connected,
but they're also lined up with constellations in the sky.
And they're all on a 33.3 degrees.
Like, that number has some power within the ley lines.
Well, one of the most powerful ancient artifacts are the pyramids. Mm-hmm. But not only in Egypt, but also in China, in the Yucatan, the mountains of America. So they're built on those nodal points on this grid, and ultimately an energy or communication system. Those nodal points are the entry points for cosmic energy, and possibly even, they believe, these were stargates and portals. And most of them, if you look at them, they will literally have the circles. We'll put up some pictures here for you to see. One of those we have actually seen and witnessed, and where was that at?
That would be at Gilgal Rephaim. And that's the Wheel of the Giants. Interesting name, given what we know about what comes through those things. But it is definitely, and it's even the way it's done, you have to walk it a certain way in order to get to the center. And we find out as we dig into this more that there is either movement, sound, vibrations, all of that impacts the ability to open these portals.
Okay, so here's the exciting thing. We've talked about this before, but this is the connection. So in the center of that wheel, I got to go in that, so we'll bring up those pictures too. But they believe it is just big enough that King Og of Bashan, the belief is that they had laid him in there. I don't think he wasn't buried in there, but they had laid him in there. They were trying to use it as a resurrection coffer, kind of, so to speak.
Right.
And so, because he was 14 feet long, and that is just, it is, now it's not quite, well, it's just right at. I mean, it would be tight. But they were trying to resurrect him even back then.
Right.
And so they were using this as a portal system. They knew that, okay, how can we make this work? So when we were there, it was the spring equinox. It was not the solstice, but the night before was actually the day up. Or I guess it was right over that hump.
Over that night, yeah.
And somebody had been there before we got there, and there were votive candles in there. They were lighting and trying to conjure up something. Now, I would argue we know what they were really trying to conjure up, because, again, I guess if you already think we're probably crazy, but, you know,
they were successful. Right.
They were successful. Something came through the portal.
Right.
But so there are these things all over, and we know how they kind of work, and it does usually take, if you look at these tribal groups, the wearing the mask, the doing the dance, it's a certain rhythm, it's
right,
a certain
the chants and the
even Mecca, you're doing a certain pattern, you're doing certain music, and that is kind of what helps open these portals and stargates as well. Okay, so some of this stuff we think is like more modern. In fact, some of the people would argue the Wheel of the Giants is, I don't know what they say, like 3,000 years old, but we found out when we got there that no, that's not the case.
Right, there's stuff underneath it that's even older than that.
And a lot of these ancient sites, you can see where it was built upon, but even below that, it goes way back. So what are some of the examples of things that were here even that predate Noah's flood?
Well, in Samaria, there's Sumerian kings that reigned for thousands of years, 40,000 years before the flood, that there are megalithic structures from when they were here. Massive megalithic structures.
I want you to say that again.
40,000 years before the flood. Let that sink in just a little bit.
Yeah. We're not talking, because, you know, you think of Methuselah, you think all that, okay, a lot of people kind of have in their head that, yeah, from Adam and them, it was only maybe, 3,000-4,000 years max, you know, something like that. But we're talking 40,000
years before the flood. And we have structures from that time that have these things depicted on them.
Right. We have temples that have stegosauruses on them. How would they know what a stegosaurus was?
Yeah, that was in Peru.
Yes.
Yeah. So Skinwalker Ranch, I know that's a huge TV series right now, but it's considered potentially cloaked Egyptian technology there, because there's a hieroglyph that shows that spiral image that indicates a stargate that matches exactly what you'll see in the Egyptian pyramids.
And we see that on a lot of Native American sites.
Oh, for
that
sure.
Circle.
Mm-hmm. We'll show you a little spirally.
Mm-hmm. Which, okay, you know, there was something that came across Facebook just the other day that I thought was interesting, because it talked about perspective. So if you looked at something on a 2D and you looked at the spiral, right, you know.
And it was flat.
It was flat. But, you know, it's like if you were to cut on that line. You've ever done that in school? Mm-hmm. And you were to pull it up, then you have the spiral like that.
Mm-hmm. And the idea in that was that if you just look at it from this perspective, it might not look like you're going anywhere. Mm-hmm. But if you pull it up, you can see how far you've come.
But I thought that was quite fitting.
Given what we're talking about.
Yeah. So Star Walkers is one of the key Native American terms. That means they have the ability to manifest through gateways and portals.
And they talk about it as something that there are people that have the ability to do that. When in the desert Southwest in the US, they talked about how they had directions on how they activate stargates and portals. There's 3 things that activate them: various sounds, various symbols, and various chants.
Cliff Mahuti, Zuni Pueblo elder, former government engineer, and he's very open and honest as he talks about all this. He talks about how often Native Americans are actually opening these portals, especially the Giant Society. Some Native Americans believe that there are caves filled with these portals to other realms that we haven't found yet, particularly the southwest of America.
Right. Some of the stuff, and he just talked about it, several of them, they talked about it just so matter-of-factly. And I'm like, we have so many people that don't even believe that they exist, and then these people are talking about doing it just like...
just going back and forth.
Like it's an average Saturday night, you know?
Mm-hmm. So we talked about the Egyptian culture and why, this goes all the way back to what was at the main hub of the Egyptian culture. It was the gods. Mm-hmm. And they have many stories and many legends, but it still came down to the gods when they would die or whatever. They were on this boat that looks like the wormhole that Einstein came up with.
Right.
But that boat was the boat that took you to the underworld.
Right, or the afterlife, or whatever that looked like.
And as we'll show a picture of this, and we'll probably get into it. On this boat, there is the something of Osiris. We'll get it so that way we can get it to you next week. But it's kind of a bell shape. Now, for me, it was a little bit of a stretch, but they talk about how it looks space age technology. Basically, they said it looks like
the Tesla coil
that was invented back in the 1800s. Yeah, that might have been a little stretch, but maybe. I don't know. It's hieroglyphics. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But the point was, this whole ship, it was going from realm to realm, and the stuff that they have on it is very interesting because we now have modern technology with things that look similar to this. So you have ancient Egypt that was coming up with all of this stuff. They were so advanced in so many ways, and then it's just gone. Just absolutely gone.
And then there have been civilizations that similarly had that. The Mayans and the Incans, civilizations that were so far ahead technology-wise and what they could build in particular.
And with each one, they're gone.
Right, they just disappeared.
See, and I argued, and we kind of looked at this with the Revelation series, that it keeps talking about the revived Roman Empire, and I would argue that the revived Roman Empire is really the revived Egyptian Empire. Throughout all of the different ancient civilizations, they have the same, I would argue it's the same gods. They just are given different names.
Right.
So it's Osiris with Egypt, it's Saturn with Greek, which is Jupiter with Rome. You can look at every single one of these. I would even argue go all the way back to Enlil and Enki and in Sumeria. What are we trying to revive? We're trying to revive something who is trying to be the wool over our heads, is that they are our creator. If you look at any of these ancient civilizations, that's what it was all about. Enki and Enlil were the creator gods for the Sumerians. You look at, you get into Zeus, but really you have, as I said, Saturn, and then you have Jupiter. They're the creator gods. You have Osiris, and then Ra and Set.
We're in Egyptian. Right.
So how do we link this then to Revelation? Well, in Revelation, it talks about the one world government, and we have the one world government, which is the Great Reset. And as I said, if you look at their sign, it's not spelled reset, it's Ra and Set, the two Egyptian gods. And what's on our dollar bill? It's the Egyptian pyramid, the all-seeing eye, which that is even more interesting, because if you look at the pyramids that are on the ground, they do not have the all-seeing eye. But when they talked on that one film about this pyramid coming down from the sky, guess what it looked like? It It looked just like the pyramid on our dollar, with the top part of the pyramid being separate
Right.
with the all-seeing eye.
Yeah.
I mean, there is so much more here in correlation that you don't even have to have an imagination to make this up. It's basically just right there.
All right there in front of you if you just go look.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's just it. Is the whole idea is that they're trying to say that they are the creation. And again, we'll get into this more as we keep going on, but there is a reason why they're doing this. This is the fallen realm playing the longest con, really known to man.
The biggest delusion.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad thing is, why are we getting into this, and we will continue, is because Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew, he said, if it were not for the days being shortened, even the elect, and who is the elect? Christians, are going to be duped, basically. They are going to be delusioned. They're going to be tricked. They're going to be
deceived.
We have, and this is nothing against Catholics, but this is the facts. On Mount Graham, we have the Vatican, who has spent so much money, billions of dollars, into the study of extraterrestrials. They have this massive telescope up on top of Mount Graham, which is actually one of the sacred sites. It's on one of the ley lines. Guess what the name of that is called?
Ooh, let me take a guess. It's called the Lucifer Telescope.
Why would you name that that?
Can't make this stuff up, guys.
The scientists that are there that observe, we'll get into that later too, but it's not just space that they're looking at there. We're going to get into what really the astronauts might have seen on the moon and why we have not gone back to the moon, because that's always been my question. Well, if we went there once, why
would you go back
after
again?
all these years later, we should be going back multiple times. Good reason why we have not gone back to the moon. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited because we're just getting into this. And there is so much to unpack, and I apologize. It took a little bit to get back into doing this. There is just so much, and we really, really want to do a good job at this. We want to try to take the mountains and mountains of information and sift through all that. And the problem is our society has sensationalized so much of it.
Right.
That it's hard to then to sift through what's sensational, what's true, what's speculation, what's actual fact, what's scientific, and what sometimes you just have to go on faith. But what does the Bible ultimately say about this? And it is not that the fallen realm is our creators. It is not that they are the gods coming back and that they are our protectors and they're going to keep us from destroying ourselves. That is the big, big lie. I mean, we have God, Yahweh, which is not his name either, but that's what we've given him because Hebrew's all consonants, no vowels. So we're guessing.
And God's name is so sacred that only the select few priests know how to actually say
his name. So we say Adonai, the Lord. Mm-hmm. The Lord is our God. And that's why I wore this, because as we are getting into the whole science fiction area, I suppose, from Star Wars, may the Lord be with you. And on the back it has the gospel message, and yours.
I picked today to where God is still writing your story, stop trying to steal the pen, because ultimately that's what the fallen realm is trying to do, is rewrite the beginning, and so that God is not there, and he is not our creator God, and we don't need salvation through Jesus. And you don't want to get sucked up into that delusion.
So if you think we're all maybe crazy here and have really gone out on a limb, let me ask you this. Did you know that there are military bases at every portal site? Did you know
that there are hidden underground bunkers, military bunkers, at all of these sacred sites?
Did you know that NASA has dumped billions of dollars into the study of actually these exact portals and stargates?
Did you know that at CERN, what they're studying there and what they're trying to do there is a very large scale opening of a portal?
And did you remember that in Revelation, John mentioned that one day there will be an angel come down with a key, and the very gates of hell will be opened. I would argue that we've had several gates already open, not the gate,
Right.
that particular one. But I think we are in times right now where we are seeing so much activity because it is getting so much closer to the end than maybe we really want to admit. But make no mistake, God is still in control. And he says, keep your eyes open, know the truth, be on the lookout, but at the same time, know where our hope and our salvation truly lies. And that's in Jesus Christ, his one and only Son. As Jesus said, I am the gate, and no one gets to the Father except through me.
So as always, what you choose to do with this information is up to you. But you can't say, we didn't tell you.
So until next time.
Shalom.